How to make the light within ourselves. Moses says in Genesis, "Let there be light," and there was light. This is not something related to a remote past, no. This tremendous principle does not change through time. It is as eternal as eternity. It is a tremendous reality that exists from instant to instant, from moment to moment. Let us remember Goethe, the great German initiate. His last words moments before dying were, "Light, more light." Goethe is reincarnated in Holland. He has a physical body. Now he does not have a masculine body. He has a feminine one, and is married to a Dutch prince. He is now a Dutch lady of high society. This is very interesting, is it not? Well, as I was saying, the light is very important, and while one lives in darkness, one will have to yearn for the light, because one is blind. Light is the greatest desire of a person who is living in a cave, who lives underground among darkness. Well, the essence is the most honorable, the most decent thing that we have inside. Originally, it comes from the Milky Way, where it vibrates with the musical note Fa. Then it has to pass through the sun with the musical note Sol, and enter this physical world with the note Mi. The essence is beautiful. It is, we would say, a fraction of the human Christic principle of everybody. It is the human soul that normally lives in the causal world. For this reason, it is correct to say that the essence is Christic, and that our consciousness in Christ will save us, etc., etc., etc. All of that is true, but the problem with our consciousness is that, being so precious, having so many marvelous virtues and precious natural powers, it is trapped among all those subjective, undesirable elements that unfortunately we carry within ourselves. That is to say, it is imprisoned in a dungeon. The essence wants the light. How? By yearning for it. There is not one who would not yearn for the light, unless that person is already lost. But when one still has some aspiration, one yearns for the light. Therefore, one has to make the light. To create the light is something very serious because it means the destruction of the receptacle or dungeon, the black den where it is imprisoned. It means to rescue, to liberate, to take it out from there, so one will be as one should be, as an illuminated person, as an authentic clairvoyant, as a real luminous being that enjoys the plenitude that by nature belongs to us and that we have the total right to possess. However, it happens that one needs heroism, or a number of tremendous heroic acts, in order to liberate the soul, to take it out from the dungeon, from the darkness in which it is imprisoned. It would be good if what I am saying here could really be comprehended by you in a conscious way, because it could happen that listening you do not hear, or that you will not feel the sense of the words that I am saying. It is necessary to valorize this. The light that shines in the darkness, like a star of 6 rays in a nocturnal sky, comes from our spermatic chaos. It is beautiful to rescue the soul from among the darkness, but not easy. The normal situation for the essence is to remain imprisoned. One will be unable to enjoy an authentic illumination while the essence, the consciousness, the soul, is trapped and imprisoned. And that is serious. Therefore, it is necessary, mandatory, to destroy the ego with a heroism superior to that of Napoleon in his great battles, superior to the struggles of Morelos in his fight for freedom, etc., in order to liberate the poor soul, to take it away from the darkness. First of all, it is necessary, as I was saying to the brothers in the past lecture, to know the techniques, the procedures that lead to the destruction of those elements in which the soul is trapped, imprisoned, so illumination can be attained. The very beginning of this is to understand the necessity of knowing how to observe. We, for example, are all sitting in these chairs. We know that we are sitting, but we have not observed these chairs. In the first case, we have the knowledge that we are sitting in the chair, but observing it is already something different. In the first case, there is, I would say, knowledge, but not observation. Observation requires a special attention to observe what it is made of, and then to submerge oneself in meditation in order to discover its atoms, its molecules. This requires directed attention. To know that one is sitting in a chair is not directed attention, it is a passive attention, but to observe the chair is directed attention. In the same way, we can think a lot about ourselves, but this does not mean that we are observing our own thoughts. To observe them is different. We live in a world of inferior emotions. Anything can generate an inferior emotion in us. We can know that we have them, but one thing is to know, and another is to observe the negative state in which one is. That is something completely different. Let us see an example. On a certain occasion, a gentleman said to a psychologist, "Well, I feel antipathy for a certain person." He said the name and last name. The psychologist answered, "You have to observe that person." The gentleman asked, "But what do I have to observe him for, if I already know him?" The psychologist concluded that the person did not want to observe, that he knew but was not observing. To know is one thing, and to observe is something absolutely different. One can know that one has a negative thought, but this does not mean that one is observing it. One knows that one is in a negative state, but one has not observed the negative state. In practical life, we see that within ourselves there are many things that would be reasons to feel ashamed: ridiculous comedies, grotesque inner states, morbid thoughts, etc. To know that we have them is not the same as having observed them. Someone might say, "Yes, in this moment I have a morbid thought," but one thing is to know that one has a morbid thought, and another is to observe it. If one wants to eliminate a particular undesirable psychological element, first of all one has to learn to observe with the intention of attaining a transformation. Because certainly, if one does not learn to self-observe, any possibility of transformation becomes impossible. When one learns to self-observe, one develops the sense of self-observation. Normally, this sense is atrophied in the human race, degenerated, but with use, it develops and unfolds. First, through self-observation, we can verify that the most ridiculous comedies, and even the most insignificant thoughts that appear internally, and that are never externalized, are created by others, by the eyes. The serious thing is when one becomes identified with those comedies, with that ridiculousness, with those protests, those angers, etc. If one becomes identified with any of those inner extremes, the I that produced them becomes stronger, and in this way the possibility of eliminating it becomes more and more difficult. So, observation is vital when we want to produce a radical transformation within ourselves. Through the hermetic work, we crystallize what was previously diffused in the sinister and vulgar mass of the primary matter. The different I's that live within our psyche are very astute, very clever. Many times they use the memories stored in the intellectual center. Let us suppose that one, in the past, fornicated with a person of the opposite sex, and that now one is trying, or not trying, to eliminate lust. Then the I of lust will use the center of memories, the intellectual center, will take the memories it needs, and will make them pass through the person's fantasy. And thus the I becomes stronger, each time stronger. For all of this, you must see the necessity of self-observing yourselves. A radical and definitive change would not be possible if we do not learn to self-observe. To know does not mean to observe. To think does not mean to observe either. Many people believe that thinking about oneself is observing, and it is not. One can think about oneself, yet not be observing. Thinking about oneself and self-observation are as different as the net and the water, or the water and the thirst. Obviously, one must not identify with any of the I's. In order to perform self-observation, one has to divide oneself into two parts. One part that observes, and another part that is observed. When the observing part sees the ridiculousness and stupidities of the observed part, there are great possibilities of discovering. Let us suppose the I of anger, that this I is not us, that it is itself. Then we may exclaim, the I of anger is an I. It has to die. I will work on it in order to disintegrate it. But if one becomes identified with the defect and says, I have anger, I am furious, then the defect becomes stronger. And in that condition, how could we eliminate it? Well, it would not be possible, would it? Therefore, one must not identify with that I, with its rage or with its tragedy, because if one becomes identified with one's own creation, one ends up living within that creation, and that is absurd. According to one's work on oneself, as one advances deeper into the field of self-observation, one becomes more and more profound. In this work, one must not overlook even the most insignificant thought. Any desire, even if it is transitory, any reaction must become a motive for observation, because any desire, any reaction, any negative thought comes from a particular I. If we want to make light, to liberate the soul, shall we allow the existence of those I's? It would be absurd. If it is light that we want, if we truly love the light, then we must disintegrate the I's. There is no other solution but to reduce to dust what we have observed. Therefore, we need to know how to observe. In this field, we must be careful with the inner chatter, because there are many negative and absurd inner dialogues but never become externalized. Naturally, we need to correct that situation, to learn to be silent, to know how to speak when it's necessary to speak, and to know how to keep silent when it's necessary to remain quiet. This law applies not only to the physical world, the external world, but also to the inner worlds, negative inner chatter. When physically externalized is harmful. This is why it's so important to eliminate that negative aspect. We must learn to cultivate internal silence. Normally, mental silence is defined as the emptying of the mind of any kind of thoughts. When one achieves the quietude and silence of the mind through meditation, etc. However, there is another type of silence. Let us suppose that a case requiring critical judgment presents itself, something related to someone. And we keep mental silence. We do not judge. We do not condemn. We remain silent externally and internally. In this case, there exists inner silence. The events of practical life must be in intimate relation with a perfect inner behavior. When the facts of practical life are in harmony with a perfect inner behavior, it is a clear sign that we are creating within ourselves the famous mental body. Inside each one of those quarrelsome and noisy I's that personify our psychological errors exists substance, psychic essence. As the atom, when fractionated, liberates energy, in the same way the total disintegration of any of those different infernal I's liberates essence. Light. Therefore, we have to make light. If we place the different parts of a radio or a tape recorder on a table, but know nothing about electronics, we would not be able to receive the subtle vibrations that pervade the cosmos. However, if through understanding we connect the different parts, we will have a functioning radio, an instrument capable of perceiving sounds that otherwise would remain inaccessible. In the same way, the different parts of these studies and this work complement each other to form a marvelous structure, the famous body of the mind. This body allows us to perceive more clearly everything that exists within ourselves and further develops the sense of inner self-observation. That is very important. The objective of observation is to produce a genuine change within ourselves, to promote an authentic and effective transformation. Once we have become skilled in observing ourselves, the process of elimination begins. There are 3 stages. First, observation. Second, critical judgment. And third, the elimination of a determined psychic I. When observing an I, we must analyze its behavior in the intellectual center, understanding all its mental games. Second, how it expresses itself through the feelings in the heart. And third, how it acts in the lower centers: motor, instinctive, and sexual. Obviously, an I expresses itself differently in each center. In the brain, an I manifests through intellect, reasoning, justifications, subterfuges, evasions, and so on. In the heart, it may appear as suffering, attachment, or even apparent love, which is often disguised lust. In the motor, instinctive, and sexual centers, it manifests as action, impulse, or lascivious urges. For example, consider lewdness. A lustful I, in the presence of a person of the opposite sex, may manifest in the mind as constant thoughts, appear in the heart as a seemingly pure love, and justify itself with, "What I feel is love, not lust." However, if one observes the sexual center carefully, one may notice activity there, revealing that the feeling is indeed lust, not true love. The crime is subtle. Lust can disguise itself in the heart as love, inspiring poems and gestures of devotion. But if one carefully observes all three centers, one can recognize it as an I. Once an I has been identified and its behavior mapped in the three centers, intellectual, emotional, and sexual, we move to the third stage, elimination. This is the final stage of the work. Here, prayer is essential. But what do we mean by prayer in the work? Prayer must be practiced on the foundation of inner self-remembering, awareness of one's own being. As we have previously explained, there are 4 states of consciousness. The first is the profound unconscious state, a dreamer whose ego leaves the body sleeping, wandering in the molecular world in a comatose state. The second is the dreamer who has returned to the physical body but believes he is awake. This type can still commit crimes, harm, or deceive, making it far more dangerous than the first, which cannot act in the physical world. This distinction emphasizes why awakening is vital. If these 2 types, those profoundly unconscious or those dreaming with an active body, pray, little can be expected. Their inner eyes may disagree, and since the other eyes are often in the majority, nature responds according to the dominant forces, and the prayer may fail. To obtain an effective result in the work, one must employ the third state of consciousness, inner self-remembering of one's own being, submerged in profound meditation. Concentrated on the inner Divine Mother, one must supplicate her to eliminate the I targeted for disintegration. The Divine Mother may act immediately in part, but total disintegration takes time and patience. Through successive efforts, the I gradually loses size and volume. An I may initially be frightfully horrible, but as it diminishes, it becomes more beautiful, eventually taking the form of a child, and finally reduces to dust. When this occurs, the consciousness trapped within is liberated, increasing the percentage of light within ourselves, a portion of light that is truly free. In this way, we proceed with each of the remaining eyes. The work is long and very hard. Many times, any negative thought, even being an insignificant one, is originated by an ancient I. That negative thought that came to the mind, as a matter of fact, indicates that there is an I inside of that thought, and that I has to be extirpated, eradicated from our psyche. It is necessary to study and to know its conduct, to see how it behaves in the 3 centers, in the intellectual, in the emotional, and, speaking in synthesis, in the motor, instinctive, sexual, to see how it works in each one of these 3 centers. According to how the I behaves, one is knowing the defect. When one has developed the sense of self-observation, one can verify that some of those I's are frightfully horrible, are real monsters of horrifying and macabre form that live within our psyche. In Venerable Peace, Samael Aun Weor.